All right, and we are live. Microformats for podcasts.
Hey everybody! So Doug, you proposed a session. Tell us what you're thinking about it.
So I just launched a podcast and grabbed a Hugo theme. And so I have the basic website up, but it has no microformats at all. So and there are some themes that Hugo themes that have microformats, but I'm not quite sure if they're
Well, what I just posted in the Etherpad, Doug, and I'll post a link to. I just made it on copy on Glitch as well. Share. Where's the share buttons? How I did it, and actually, I think Sven helped me with the CSS grid and set me up with columns. I do have to fix something with a media query, but that's not why we're here. So I don't want to get off track on that. But I'll grab this as well and throw it in the Etherpad. Where's it? Oh yeah, Etherpad's in the other browser because I can't use Firefox for that. And so that's the same thing on, and I'll walk you through my screen, I guess. And Eddie, do you have one set up, or your podcast set up like this?
So my URL is .com. That has microformats as well. So I haven't.
Better than mine. Yeah, we might want to look at yours first. I'm assuming you'd be more proper than me.
I mean, I don't know about that, but yeah, I did try to be very intentional about because I sent mentions when I included people on the podcast and everything. So it should. I don't know that I've really tested it though.
What is the? Yeah, can you just show us the URL?
Yeah, definitely. So it is my URL is .com. So I'll post that in the chat and put it in the Etherpad. And let me share the screen.
Yeah, and then I'll share mine next and show you guys what I did.
All right. All right, can you guys see that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I think it's ready.
Great. So I can inspect the element here since we are doing microformats. That's the stuff that really matters. So here I have a div that has an H feed. And as you can see from the highlights above, all of the episodes are inside of that H feed. And then each episode is an H entry. So regardless of what it looks like visually, we've got an H entry there. And then each H entry has a U author. I'm just putting the U author to the current homepage. And I have an H card at the top. So when you scroll up to the top here, this description is part of the H card.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so the podcast itself has an H card?
Correct. The podcast itself is an entity with an H card.
Okay.
And I mean, like if you do a personal one, that's fine to do that. But yeah, if it's an entity that you want to exist outside of yourself, I think you can, just like a business, you can give it its own H card.
Oh, interesting.
I think the yeah, so then I have a U photo for the badge logo. I'm not sure if we're still figuring out exactly how cover artwork should work. Like if it's, I think if it's in a H card, it's a U photo, but if it is attached to a episode, then it would be a featured. So that's still kind of being worked out. But yeah, so you've got a U photo and then of course a P note to explain, oh, I don't have a P name on here. Interesting.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool because it's a good comparison of mine because I didn't know about setting it up as its own. So I just named it as an H feed. So I just made an H feed which has a P name. So
nice.
And then the H card's mine. But the podcast title is the P name of the H feed, and then I put a P summary in there.
Okay.
And then I have a bunch of, and then each show is an H entry. Now again, like I didn't know what I was doing, so like I said, because I figured nobody subscribes to these in a feed, but it just sounded to me like you would be a feed. I'm going to copy yours because it sounds like you're probably copying other people. But that's how I did it.
I have copied some stuff. The stuff, obviously, it's not all worked out because, like you said, no one's really following an MF2 podcast right now. But I did two things. One, like I tried to think what happens if my social reader follows this. But two, I thought about what Bridgie and Unmung and a couple of those other things do with converting the there's a couple things that like either convert MF2 to RSS, or there's also RSS to MF2 converters.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of looked at those and tried to kind of base this a combination of that and what would look good. So like that's the reason, like if you follow this in a social reader, I want you to see my URL is and my URL is badge logo as the like author in the social read. So that's why I do the H card like that.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So how do you designate the authors of a podcast? Because somebody obviously is behind it. So does this link to your H card anywhere?
It does not. So yeah, so that's the question. And so far we've just delegated to not link to the people. So the way that I have done it is the only link you have to me is okay, you actually have to go to the individual item. Here we go. All right. On the individual item in the notes, I do a U category H card. So I link to me and I link to the guest, in this case you, as a U category H card so that it shows that those people are tagged in this episode. So it doesn't necessarily say like I'm the host or you're the guest or anything like that, but it does say like, okay, these two people are tagged in this. So if you want to link to them, like, you know, you can.
I like the way that you tag people with the U category. I like whenever I don't tag people that like when I put an H card on in my website. This is just totally randomly. I like that because then it's a kind of person tag.
Yeah, and I thought it was fun because you know not everyone's site supports it, but I sent a web mention to each person that I had in an episode so far. So then if their site supported it, it could say, "Hey, you were tagged in this, you know, audio." Or a podcast episode, or however it calls it in their thing.
Sweet. Can you unshare?
I got the web mention, but I didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, I do
well,
the
I
same
didn't know what to do with it.
Well, I cheat. My show. I have a show link that goes back to my known site. Can you unshare my Eddie, and then I'll share my screen?
Oh yeah, I didn't realize it only allows one share at a time.
Oh, maybe it does. I didn't realize it doesn't do that. I guess.
No worries.
My screen. Application window. Now I just learned like I was probably doing some things wrong, so I will.
Eddie, do you receive web mentions on your podcast page?
I do, but I don't display them because I don't know how to display them.
Yeah, I also receive them, but I haven't displayed them because it's a Jekyll site, so I haven't gone through the headache of getting those to match up yet.
All right, so I'll show you what I have. So you guys see my screen now?
Yep.
Is it big enough? Do you need me to enlarge anything?
I think it's pretty good.
All right, and if anybody's using screen readers joining us in the Etherpad, I have a link to the to a GitHub account and my Glitch. Actually, just don't use Glitch on a screen reader. To GitHub. So if you are in a screen reader watching, you can find a link to what I'm going over right in the Etherpad. So what I did is, and I did it a little bit differently than Eddie, and I didn't know what I was doing, is mine, I just set it up as an H feed, figuring if you're going to subscribe to it, you know, like you'd subscribe to the feed. And then so that the name of the feed is the name of the show. And then I have my H card there, and then a summary. And then I only put art on the top box. And I honestly didn't know what I was doing, but I do carry the H card for each person on the show. But what I do in the show notes, and then there's a link to the audio, because I figured out a way. Basically, I'm using the Internet Archive to host on my podcasts because pretty much everything I do is in the public domain or I release with a Creative Commons image. So it's an easy way to host podcasts for free, and it's and it's on the internet. Well, and to make a donation when you're done. But it's a great way to do it. You can set up a show, and they just redid the editor. And I can show people how that works too, because it used to be a really Flash-based editor to upload a show. but that got redone. And then I link to my and I don't know, you guys might tell me if that's wrong, because I always tend to put URLs in the wrong places all over the place all the time. But then I link to the show link, which is just a post on Known, so that I can also get, interactions and people can go back there and talk. But I don't have it set up here, but I used to have the endpoints, and I'll go back and copy and paste them. But because I used to have them there. So I'll just copy them over. So what I'm doing for people who might be watching is I went to a different page, and I'm getting my web mention endpoints, and I'm just going to copy and paste them back on that page. And I don't know if I'm supposed to do that, can do that, but that's what I'm going to do. And where was I? To ponder. Oh, and then I don't know, Eddie, have you tried throwing yours through Granary yet? That Ryan released. It's pretty cool. So I
have not thrown mine in there yet.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and so this is kind of what mine looks like, the podcast. So I have a top lead show, and then the other ones are down below it. And I think it was Sven who helped me figure this out, because I used to do this with an explicit grid, not an implicit grid. And every time I added a show, I'd have to change every single letter. Because I used it to kind of learn a little bit about CSS grid, but now I don't have to do that anymore, and I'm so thankful. But yeah, so it has the media there, and then there's a show link that either goes back to my old WordPress site, because that's where it started, or the newer ones will go to my blog there. So people did want to comment, I give them that option there. But now I can accept web mentions on these pages. So that's kind of my spot, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we took a pretty similar approach. Right. There's just a few differences, and the differences are in ways that it hasn't really, nothing's really parsing it. So, someone could come out with a way to parse it that doesn't match really either of the way we're doing it. But I think if you have to ask your use case for the microformats, Doug, and so if your goal is to be able to not have to, say, build an RSS feed and instead use something like Granary, then that's one great thing that you could do is say, okay, how's Granary work, and make sure your microformats are going to match what Granary wants. Because I haven't tried putting mine through Granary, so mine might not work. But Greg's apparently used it and enjoys it.
I mean, yeah, well, I haven't tried. The ultimate test is, can you pass it through Granary and then get it approved by iTunes? That would be that's the test of a podcast, because that's such a
that's true.
Because there's those specific categories, and that's an important thing to remember, is because iTunes is you have to use their categories. You have that I haven't tested fully yet.
That's true. Yeah, that's definitely something to test. Is okay, now can we get something into iTunes that uses this? I
hate to define it by it's just it's a lot of control over podcasting, but it's got to work that way.
Yeah, but they actually have a RSS feed already as part of the theme, so I'm not. My artwork isn't big enough yet to submit it to iTunes, so I don't know, but I assume it'll work, hopefully.
Yeah, the only thing you have to do with the theme, even any iTunes theme, and Eddie can tell you more about this, because he's, it's just there's specific rules you have to follow about image sizes and categories.
They can be a little picky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see the changes? They want the episode number.
Guys, I think I have to go.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. But what was that, Doug?
Now they want the episode number as metadata rather than in the title?
It can still be in the title. So there's a title feed, and then inside of that, there's an iTunes episode number and an iTunes title. And it's just in the iTunes title, they would prefer not to have the episode number, but they're not going to drop your podcast if it's got it in there. There was some unfortunate bad communication on their part, which they have rectified, but of course the rectifications haven't been publicized. So
yeah, I received one of those emails that's we aren't actually going to kick you out. We just would prefer you not to include numbers. Awesome. Does anyone else have any thoughts on microformats and podcasts and any
I would
explorations there?
love to build a WordPress theme for, I'm going to be launching a new podcast soon.
Oh,
And
cool.
I would love to build a WordPress theme for the site that actually has good microformats, which are also podcast microformats. So,
Nice. That would be awesome.
yeah, well, I mean, you know, in my copious free time, I'm sure I'll get around to it. Need to figure out how to denoise the audio from the other side first. So, priorities.
That's true. For podcasts, the audio is definitely higher priority than the website.
Yeah, that's just it. Like the website is basically like, here's how you get this into your podcast app of choice. Done.
Yeah. I would imagine most people probably expect the less time they're on the website before the podcast is in their app, the better. So
Exactly. But at some point, you know, that's on my list of things to do to get that there. So
awesome.
yeah. I have found the Etherpad again. Yay.
So Doug,
do guests on your podcast create like a, I don't know, guests entry or something that refers to the podcast page? Kind of like an RSVP, but
oh, that's
That
interesting.
could be fun.
Yeah, yeah.
New
Have not
post kind.
experimented with that, but that seems fun. So, Doug, do you have a specific reason you wanted to add the microformats, or just to have your website be more complete, or?
maybe, well, I was thinking with an eye towards web mentions and actually supporting interactivity, but
Yeah, that's huge.
since I use WordPress, it's kind of like I've never done much direct development with microformats, so kind of a learning tool.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a good way to learn. And I think that really one reason I started doing my URL is aside from, which is on a very extended hiatus, but was one to, interview different people about the indie web, but two was to say, if yes, I'm going to be in iTunes and do all that stuff, but what does a indie web friendly podcast look like as far as receiving web mentions, sending web mentions, and all that kind of stuff? And so I've definitely done the sending web mentions, and I just need to work on the receiving web mentions to kind of fill it out a little bit more. But I think that would definitely be super cool because then Chris Aldrich and David Chansky, of course, have the IndieWeb podcast that they do, and they receive listen posts. So if people create listen posts that link to their podcast, then it will actually display on their WordPress that like so and so listened to this, and it has a face file, kind of like a like page or something like that. In fact, let me see if I can pull up that real quick and show that because that'll be interesting. Share screen. All right, so we are on David's website, and I'll go back to a little bit of an older one. Let's see if I go to the permalink here. Yeah, here we go. Oh, yeah. And you sent one, Doug. Yep. So this is an interesting thing that they can do where it's listening And then they've got 3 people who have sent listen posts.
I like the sound of having that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I need to figure out how to do that.
Yep. We also need to get people actually doing it. But I guess the more consumers, the more people will post it. I think a lot of people don't bother posting right now because, you know, they're like, I'm going to post it, but it's not going to do anything. So definitely that's something I want to get onto. My URL is, as well as my microcast.
Do you know, is it in iTunes, the IndieWeb podcast?
I do not believe it is. No, I think you have to. It's always a journey in discoverability to be able to find the RSS feed every time I have to resubscribe to it in a different app, because I don't even think. Yeah, I think you basically just have to look on David's page for where he lists the RSS feed, and then just subscribe directly to that.
And it's usually on Huffduffer too.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, if you subscribe to IndieWeb on Huffduffer, that'll work. Although you also get a lot of other random podcasts you may or may not want. Hey, Grant. Do you have any thoughts on microformats and podcasts or anything?
Not really, to be honest. I just sort of listening in.
Yeah, no worries. I just thought I'd include you since I saw you hanging out.
Nothing to add at the moment. I don't post any, and then I myself don't really have much interest in posting listen posts either. Not sure why. I just think of it as more of a private thing that I don't really care about sharing so much.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's fair. Yeah, I used to manually post my listen posts, so I had a little bit more control over which ones posted and which ones didn't. Now I just have my Overcast feed automatically imported into my website, so everything just goes everywhere. So thankfully, I don't think anyone.
Trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thankfully, I don't think anyone really like I keep it out of my primary feed, so I'm not like blasting people with podcast posts. But
I want to start getting all those in as private posts once I've shifted over to WordPress, and then I can like manually go back and be like, okay, yeah, so these ones I posted, I want to post publicly, and add a comment to them or something, so
nice.
I know why I publicized it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I've thought of doing something similar where like have like a moderated post. So like, because like private posts most likely will probably stay private for me. So I've thought of like something like a moderated status where it could come in and basically trigger my website to say, oh, this is a moderated post, which means like you want to take an action on it. And so then it could send me a notification and say, hey, a new moderated post has reached the website. Do you want to display it? Do you want to edit it? Something like that. But yeah.
Things that I want private, I save it to files in Dropbox.
That's a good way to do it. Yeah.
So, if I'm sending it to my website, I'm assuming that I want to do something with it to publicize it at some point. The question is just when.
That's fair. It's generally not a good idea to post private to your website, but exactly. I ignore that sense of reasoning, and instead I use my website as a journal. Not often. I don't really journal that much, but I will write journal entries as private posts on my website. So nobody hack my website, please.
Yeah, that's my weekend project settled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also I don't do podcasts, but I do private posts. So I have a fairly extensive journal. It's like been going for a year or more at least. And it's like, yeah, fully private. But then I started at some point trying to make my site into PWA, so it load in the client side. So I had to make sure I didn't sync all the private posts onto someone else's device and they could look at them.
Oh no, yeah, that would be bad. So, yeah.
Yeah, that may defeat the point of having private posts.
Like, you can't see it in the user interface, but I'm going to throw all this into your browser so you can just, look through what you like.
It would be like stored in the, what are they called? Like the local database in your browser, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the good news is the vast majority of people are probably not perusing the local databases in the browser, so you're probably safe.
And then there's people like us who may or may not go, oh, hey, what's this weird? Ooh, that's more information than I wanted.
It's like, oh, thanks, Grant. I appreciate the journal entries for free.
Yeah, I didn't need to know that you sleep 6.5 hours a night.
All right. I guess, do we have any other thoughts on microformats? If not, we can just kind of hang out here. I'll probably stop the broadcast if we're done with that, and then we can hang in this channel if we want for 30 minutes, or you can grab a beverage or anything like that. But yeah.
So do you think there might be a place for like a microformats validator, kind of like, was it IndieWeb.rocks or whatever it is?
Micropub.rocks.
Micropub.rocks.
But there isn't there? IndieWebify Me. I thought that IndieWebify Me or one of those has some microformats.
It has.
I know I used one on my website.
Yeah, it definitely has some, but I don't know that it like does a wide range. It kind of like checks the ones that it expects for you to like have like an H card and then like have some basic posts and stuff.
But on the Microformats website, I'm sure I found something at some point. Code and tools. That sounds like a good place.
That is a good place.
Microformats 2 parsers. Validators.
Yeah, what would a validator even do?
Well, it would probably also check for iTunes, craft, and like.
So essentially, it would be like validated for a purpose. Like you won't say like compare. It'd almost be like a test. Like compare this page to see if it's like a photo, or compare this page to see if it's a like a podcast feed or different things like that. Is that kind of what you're thinking about, Doug?
Yeah, like. I mean, it's kind of unformed right now. So if you wanted to make it more concrete, then say, oh, can we find, the hosts, the guests, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Basically a way that you could basically just put it in and it would say like, this is what I think this page is, and here is your information. And like, if you were trying, like, it appears that this is, a podcast feed, but you're missing X, Y, and Z for it to be a full podcast feed. Or this appears to be a video, but it's missing. And that would actually probably be super useful, because occasionally I follow feeds and then like I have some posts that I want to reply to in my social reader, but there's no URL attribute. So I can't reply to them because even though they were parsed in a feed, my social reader does not know the URL of that permalink. So a validator would help that too. Like, hey, it looks like you have, an H feed, but we can't find the actual permalink for your posts or things like that.
However, in order to make a validator, we need a suggested format.
We do.
For it to validate against. Because otherwise it could just go, I found stuff. No idea if it's any good.
That's true.
I mean, I can program a web page that says I found stuff, no idea if it's any good, but it's just going to be index.html and hard-coded. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think validators in general for microformats would be useful. And then, yeah, I think a podcast validator for microformats could be like in addition to that, once we have the actual suggested microformats for a podcast feed determined.
Sounds quite similar in a way to my idea for the other session of testing post types, but in reverse. So I was thinking of testing publishing, being able to publish them, but you're testing that they're published correctly.
Hey Grant, there's something that went wrong with your audio there.
He's just muted himself, so I'm guessing he knows.
Probably realized.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that what happened
People
to my audio?
Does tend to give that impression. It's not you, Grant. It's your audio.
Yeah. Is that what happened to my audio earlier?
No, yours was like very quiet and like robotic.
It sounded like a robot. Yeah. It was a great robot impression. 10 out of 10.
Interesting. Well, what happened was my AirPods died, and I tried swapping which one. So I wonder if the one that I put into the charger was like sending charger noise. Probably.
I think it just got confused about life. Like AirPods do that occasionally. So
that's true, especially when they're near the end of their poor battery lifespans.
March 25th. Just gotta wait a little while longer.
Yeah.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes. Sounds good now.
Yes, the headphones. So I was just saying, it sounds almost the opposite direction of the post type testing I was suggested for a session. So that was the idea that you could publish a bunch of test posts to your website to see if you display, say, a podcast or audio post correctly, and you actually want to test then automated some way that it is displayed correctly and it has all the right markup and everything.
Yeah. So like you said, it's kind of the opposite direction, but the same general principle, which is how do we make sure our posts are getting posted correctly and then displaying correctly. I know I tend to I think a Microformats validator is great because just the other day, Aaron Preki asked why I didn't have check-ins on my check-ins and like a check-in property. And I'm like, I thought I put it in there at some point, but it's not there now apparently. So whenever I change my theme, I seem to occasionally lose microformats. So having something that could basically ping the validator and say, hey, is this still a check-in? And if it is not a check-in anymore, then say, hey, you need to look at this. You broke something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like having tests kind of on both sides of that. One, getting the post types into your system, and then two, checking that your display of the post types look good. So sweet. Now someone with their infinite time just needs to build all this, and we will be all set.
Well, I'll make you a deal. Give me either a DeLorean or a time turner, and I'll get right on it.
There you go. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, it'd be really awesome to have a tool like Totally, TOTA11Y, where it's basically would do the client side validation and you could like see where things are going wrong and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know how the JavaScript parser is. Microformats parser.
I think that's in disrepair, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah. I can't remember. I think there was an issue with that at some point, but I can't remember exactly what.
Yeah, it mostly still works, but the guy did it's not been active in ages, so it's a couple of years old, I think, now.
Okay. Oh, I think what it was they were trying to get the thing actually a hosted version of it up, and I think they were having issues. But I guess it might work on like just on a given person's website. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast. So if anyone's tuning in from YouTube, check back at on the YouTube channel at 5 p.m. for the next session that will be profile pages, and we will see you then.